They want Kim Jong-un to understand that they have the capability to strike North Korea at any moment they wish and in any format they wish.
A U.S. B-1 bomber took part in a U.S.-Korean military exercise to send a signal to the North. A U.S. B-1 bomber Wednesday joined a large-scale U.S.-South Korean military exercise that North Korea has denounced as pushing the peninsula to the brink of nuclear war as tension mounts between the North and the United States. The bomber flew from the Pacific U.S.-administered territory of Guam and joined U.S. F-22 and F-35 stealth fighters in the annual exercises, which run until Friday. These drills come a week after North Korea said it had tested its most advanced intercontinental ballistic missile, capable of reaching the United States as part of a weapons program that it has conducted in defiance of international sanctions and condemnation. The inclusion of this bomber in the U.S. military exercises comes on the same day UN Undersecretary General for Political Affairs Jeffrey Feltman, a former senior U.S. diplomat, met in Pyongyang with North Korean Vice Foreign Minister Pak Myong-guk on what the state media said involved bilateral cooperation and other issues of mutual interest. It was on the second day of his visit, the first by a high-ranking UN official since leader Kim Jong-un came to power in 2011. He's also expected to meet the foreign minister, Ri Yong-ho. The Feltman visit has raised hopes for United Nations mediation to ease global tensions over the North's nuclear and missile programs. U.S. State Department spokeswoman Heather Nauert said Feltman was not carrying any U.S. communication.
He's not traveling on behalf of the U.S. government, and he's not traveling, I want to make this clear, with any kind of message from the U.S. government.
She said Washington is open if Pyongyang was serious about giving up its nuclear weapons. However, recent activities show they are not interested, she said. Meanwhile, South Korean President Moon Jae-in will travel to Beijing next week for talks with his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping. Now, the inclusion of the bomber that flew over South Korea from its base in Guam was an apparent show of force following last week's latest North Korean missile test. Joint U.S. South Korean air exercises this week are scheduled to conclude in 2 days. Harry Kazianis is Director of Defense Studies at the Washington-based Center for the National Interest. He told VOA's Victor Beatty the military exercises are intended to send a clear message to Pyongyang.
They want Kim Jong-un to understand that they have the capability to strike North Korea at any moment they wish and in any format they wish.
The possibility of war with North Korea is rising every day with the regime's nuclear and missile programs unresolved. That from the U.S. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster during an interview with Fox News on Sunday. He said North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is getting closer to completing his weapons program, and there's not much time left for the international community to solve this issue. He admitted China has implemented unprecedented sanctions on the regime, but urged the country to do more, not to satisfy other countries, but to secure its own interest. McMaster warned that threat of South Korea and Japan possibly becoming nuclear armed wouldn't be in China and Russia's interests.
Now, I don't think the Trump administration, at least at the moment, is thinking about using its military capabilities to hit North Korea's nuclear or missile programs. But they want to make sure and send the message to the North Korean regime that all options are on the table, like they've been saying over and over again. And they want this to be crystal clear to Kim. And they want to demonstrate to him that if he ever thought about using military force against either South Korea or Japan or the U.S. homeland, that we would be able to respond with devastating force. That's why we do these drills, and I think that's why we're trying to send this message to Kim.
Of course, Russia and China have been pushing this so-called dual suspension proposal, which would mean that the North Koreans suspend their nuclear and missile testing. The U.S. and South Korea would suspend their joint exercises. Is that a viable possibility?
A few months ago, I would have said no, because the North Koreans get to pocket all of the nuclear and missile advances that they have undertaken in the last decade or so. However, I have been shocked at the speed at which this crisis has really brewed over the last few months. So at present, I wouldn't be completely against a freeze-for-freeze proposal, but I think the United States and North Korea would need to negotiate very, very quickly to see if that's even viable. The North Koreans are notorious for offering one set of proposals, and then when you sit down at the negotiation table with them, trying to get something completely different. So I think we're exploring it with the North Koreans, but I have a feeling the North Koreans have bigger aspirations in mind. I think what they're really looking for is probably sanctions relief. The sanctions are biting them very substantially right now.
This reported B-1B Lancer bomber overflight is coming as the most senior UN official, Jeffrey Feltman, the Undersecretary General for Political Affairs, is visiting North Korea. There's a lot of speculation about what his intent is. Would the UN possibly be a good mediation point to ease tensions on the peninsula?
I think they would absolutely be a fabulous way to open channels. I mean, even if it's just the North Koreans sort of communicating through the UN to the United States, to Seoul, to Japan, what its intentions are. Because the next few weeks, I think, are very, very key here. We have to remember the North Koreans over the summer and into the fall have been testing missiles at a very, very fast pace. And what's interesting is when they deploy a new missile system, they've been testing it twice. So we have to expect the North Koreans are going to test the Hwasong-15 again. And if I had to put a date on it, I'd mark your calendar for December 17th. That's the date and the anniversary of Kim Jong-il's death, and I think that's very likely when you could see another ICBM test.
Washington is weighing its options on how to respond to Pyongyang's latest move. More sanctions are given, but their effectiveness is highly questionable, with the regime launching another missile despite having so many already piled up against it. According to our Yoon Shin, such trend is leading to concerns war could be on the horizon.
The U.S. is running out of time when it comes to North Korea. This, according to top Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. In an interview with CBS, Graham warned that every missile test pushes Washington closer to a preemptive military strike. His comment echoes those of National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, who said over the weekend that the possibility of war with North Korea is increasing every day. Pyongyang's test of an ICBM last week, believed to be able to hit all parts of the continental U.S., sent tensions soaring. But reports say Washington officials now believe the missile likely disintegrated while re-entering the Earth's atmosphere.
Washington seems to think North Korea's ICBM technology is not yet perfected. Experts say the recent missile likely did not survive re-entry into the atmosphere, so most officials believe now is not the time for talk of preemptive war.
So for the time being, Washington will likely turn to more sanctions aimed at putting economic pressure on the North. According to President Trump, another set of major sanctions on the isolated regime is on its way. But again, questions remain about whether they will make a difference.
At the moment, it's expected Washington will target the North's marine transportation by putting additional sanctions on its trading companies. A naval blockade as a new measure is also possible, but without cooperation from China and Russia, it's unclear how effective these sanctions could be.
New measures on a global scale, including China and Russia, are also expected in the coming weeks. The UN Security Council will hold a meeting of foreign ministers on the 15th, where they'll likely consider what more can be done beyond the waves of sanctions they've already imposed.
Meanwhile, the state-run Jilin Daily in China's northeast city of Jilin near North Korea's border published a full front page Wednesday of advice, including illustrations on how readers can protect themselves in the event of a nuclear weapons attack. The Global Times called it part of national defense education and acknowledged the article sparked heated discussions on Chinese social media sites amid tensions on the Korean peninsula.